Hi, everybody. So we are here to discuss Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. This is very exciting. And I'm here joined with Abby, Jeremy, and my friend Richard. So if you want to start, Abby, introduce yourself, and then Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Abby.
And
I don't know what else to say.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
Well, why don't you say at least where you're, since we have different locations, where you're, what part of the world you're hailing from?
Sure, we're living in West Center, Washington.
Cool. And Richard, you want to go next?
Hey, well, I'm Richard. I live in the northwest of England, so I sound a bit different from everybody else.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So I'm, of course, Rachel, and I'm out of Utah, and we are going to have a lot of fun. We're talking about mainly the movie version of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I have a few little things. I have a very small little summary that I did of the book. It's just 186 characters, or 186 words. So here it is. Harry Potter is the boy who lived. As a baby, he survives the power of evil Lord Voldemort's curse. Sent to live with his hateful relatives, the Dursleys, Harry doesn't know of his past or anything about the wizarding world. On his 11th birthday, his world changes with an invitation to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. While at school, he meets his two best friends, Ron and Hermione, learns how to play Quidditch, and gets an enemy in Draco Malfoy. Harry faces challenges in Professor Snape, who doesn't like him, and gets guidance from Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. In the end, Harry and his friends must keep the Sorcerer's Stone and its promise of immortality out of the hands of Voldemort and his stooge, Professor Quirrell.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And I had a few little production notes that I thought were interesting. So the novel was written in 1997, or published in 1997 by J.K. Rowling, as we all know. And she sold the movie rights for £1 million for the first 4 movies, which is the deal of a century for Warner Brothers. And her only requirement was that all of the cast be British or Irish. And I guess Chris Columbus he was the director of these first 2 films. He did all the casting, was very involved with all the casting, and to the point where he had seen Daniel Radcliffe in David Copperfield, BBC production, and he was so determined to have Daniel Radcliffe as Potter that he actually fired the casting director, and yeah, so he was really, because she wasn't sold on it, I guess, and so I thought that was interesting. And Rupert Grint and Emma Watson were both found in cold auditions. I guess Emma Watson was found off of a recommendation of her theater teacher, and I guess Rupert Grint said he sent in a video audition because he thought, I have red hair, I can play Ron. So yeah, I mean, that's just some basic stuff. I did find out that I guess Alan Rickman wasn't the original cast of Snape, but that Tim Roth was going to do it, but he gave up the part to play to be in Planet of the Apes with Tim Burton, which is a really bad movie. So that's kind of funny, I thought. So, okay, so that's just some basic stuff. My first question is just, I guess, what age were you when you read the books, and how big a fan are you of the series in general? And I'll start. And for me, I read, I think, the first 2 books when I was a sophomore in college. So I was older because it didn't come out until, I don't think it even came out in '97 in the U.S. Maybe it did, but I certainly hadn't heard of it back then. So So yeah, I read and I thought they were fun. I've never been that into fantasy kind of stories. Haven't been my favorite, but I liked them. I thought they were good. And yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the series in general. Like I like it, but I'm not like hardcore. So yeah, if you want to start, Abby, just kind of figure.
Yeah, I was older too. I wasn't a sophomore in college, but I didn't read the book actually until after I saw the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Someone had given me a set of all 4 of the books, but I couldn't get through the first chapter. And it wasn't really my genre, and I just kind of was like, this looks fine, but I'm not going to read it right now. And then I think at some point on a visit with my dad, he took us to see the movie, and I was like, oh, this is actually cute. I could read this. I just have to get through the first chapter. So yeah, I was a little bit older, and I didn't pick it up until after the first movie came out.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah,
What
so
about you?
I started 2003. I saw both the first 2 movies, and then started reading the books. Actually, borrowed the first books from Abby when we were just friends. One of our first interactions, actually, was me reading her Harry Potter books. But I saw the first 2 movies, and then I started reading through the books and caught up with the series. I think we were like at the midnight release for 5, and then 6 and 7. But 1 through 4 read together after seeing the first 2 movies. We're both like really. I mean, we don't have like Harry Potter memorabilia around the house, but we both really enjoy the series. I think we probably own a couple of sets of the books, and just a really big fan. I'd say Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. That was my favorite first read of any book I've ever read. Just so exciting. I stayed up all night to finish it. So I'm a big fan of this series. Really loved it, and excited to see more movies coming out now.
Cool.
Right. So, well, basically, I would have it would have been either 1999 or 2000 when I started reading the books. I was about 13 then, and a friend of them just recommended to me, just saying, "Have you read these books? I thought they're really good." And so I got through the first 3 before Goblet of Fire came out, and I think by the time Deathly Hallows came out, I was such a big fan that I was waiting with bated breath for my postal order to come. And I am just a very big fan of the books right now, and they are definitely among my favourite books that I've ever read, if not my complete favourites. And I've actually been rereading the whole series this year for my blog.
Yes. Yeah, you've been doing really good stuff with detailed, and we'll have a link to all of our content, but Richard's blog in the description section. Yeah, so that's cool. I think we all like these books, and I think the movies, I think in general are I don't think any of them are horrible. I think they're all decent movies. So okay, so let's so what was your overall thoughts of this film on the rewatch? I'll go first again. I have to say it didn't hold up as well as I thought it would, because when I did my Harry Potter rankings with my sister, I had this as my 3rd favorite, because I remember just being really enticed by the way that they set up the world and everything, and I think that is strong, but I found it kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie, like especially the Quidditch parts in the middle. Like this movie should not be 2.5 hours long. So we'll talk a little bit more about it, but I was a little bit underwhelmed. I mean, I did like it, but I don't know, I didn't find it held up super well on this rewatch, I must be honest. So, I don't know. What about you, Abby?
I agree. I think I understand why I liked it so much when it first came out and on first watching. But I feel like it doesn't hold up that well over time. It's a very cute movie. But you're right. That same part where there's the Quidditch game and the troll, and there's all these events that feel like they're just kind of like plodding through the plot points. It doesn't feel very authentic, and I'm not very drawn into it. It's just, oh, here's another thing for them to do. So that feels it does kind of drag there. There's some pacing problems and things. But ultimately, you meet Harry. I love Harry and Ron are kind of awkward in this one. Like, it's kind of funny to me that he was so insistent that Dan Radcliffe be Harry Potter, because truthfully, while I love Dan Radcliffe in this role, especially over time, it could have been someone else. You know, it's not a role where you're like, oh, it had to be Dan. It could have been someone else, and that would have been fine. Hermione, I don't feel like is that way. I feel like Emma Watson was born to be Hermione Granger. And she's just adorable in that role, and she's funny throughout the movie, and yeah, those are my thoughts after my rewatch. I hadn't watched it in a while.
Yeah, so I really enjoy both this and Chamber of Secrets. I feel like with Chris Columbus directing, they're the best movies as far as staying true to the books, and where you really get the main parts of the story just from watching the movie, and I really appreciate that. Sorry. I felt like on the rewatch the CG is getting pretty dated, especially if they're trying to show a human flying on a broom or something like that. If it's the troll, things like that looked okay. But when they were trying to mimic the human form, it got really, like Abby referred to it as kind of a bad video game looking like that. And at times you do see that, and it just doesn't. The CG isn't holding up. But overall, I think it was really good. Some of the characters are pretty flat. But again, it's their first time out trying out these characters, and we just know them. We know there's so much more depth to them because of the 7 books. So maybe there's that to it, but it was still very enjoyable. Overall.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a pretty solid film overall. I mean, I do agree with what Abby said about plodding through the plot points. It does basically stick very close to the book and kind of plays it safe while cutting out some of the things that aren't really necessary. But then some of that editing does get a little bit clumsy, like the different circumstances of how they get to the 3rd floor corridor and how they all get the tension. Some of it does feel a bit rushed, like with how much they're trying to put in. But I think with the first book, it is a bit difficult to see what they could cut out, because a lot of the foundations for the future stories do have to be laid down. And besides that, some of the acting of the younger actors is a bit weak, like Daniel Radcliffe, as Abby said. I didn't really think he was that expressive in this film, in most of the scenes, though he does get better later on. Whereas Rupert Grint and Emma Watson and Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy were both better. And but besides that, while it is quite a long film, I didn't find it terribly boring. In fact, it was still quite entertaining throughout, and the sets and the costumes were done extremely well. A lot of detail, and some of the special effects are better than others. But also and the way it treated the story and kind of brought the whole thing to life, I thought it was a good first effort.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think a lot of the magic of this first one is we get to see Hogwarts. Like, Hogwarts is so amazing in our minds, and we really get to see it. And Chris Columbus really brought it to life beautifully.
Yes, I agree. The sets and the feel and the magic is definitely really well done.
And I think as a kids movie, this still really does hold up. Like, my 6-year-old still really, she loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It is definitely the most kid-friendly style in these ones, with Chris Columbus directing. It's kind of more of a whimsical style, and the John Williams theme is it sounds a bit like a Home Alone movie sometimes.
Yeah. We're John Williams, amazing again, as he always is. It became another iconic theme. He's so good at those themes. Okay, so my next question, and I kind of wanted Richard to talk about this to sort of lead off this question, is how did it adapting the book to the film? And because he's been doing on his blog a series where he dives into the books and the movies pretty in detail. So I wanted to start with him, and then we can each kind of talk about it. I did read the book this week as well as watch the movie. So I don't know if you want to. What do you think about the adaptation?
Well, basically, it's not so much like actively changing things as stuff that gets left out or edited, like in the after Hagrid has told Harry about Voldemort in the Leaky Cauldron, we then go straight over to Platform 9 3/4 on which takes place in the 1st of September in the book, whereas in the book Harry gets another month with the Dursleys, so that looks a bit strange. And then one of the things that our change would be as I said, they get to the 3rd floor corridor quite randomly. There's no like arranging of this duel with Malfoy in the trophy room, so that feels a bit clumsy. And one thing the film does seem a bit confused about is how Harry and Ron see Hermione at first, because Harry and Ron quite hit it off straight away on the train, and then they don't like Hermione for a while, and she's really a bit of a know-it-all and a bit insufferable until the incident with the troll on Halloween, and that's made quite clear in the book. And in the film, it's all a bit back and forth, like Ron says about Hermione, she's mental, that one, and then saying she hasn't got any friends. But then there's other scenes where you see them together, like when Hermione shows Harry his Quidditch trophy, his dad's Quidditch trophy rather, and then when they're walking together when they come to the 3rd floor corridor, and that just seems a bit confused. But ultimately it is quite a faithful adaptation, apart from the bits it cuts out, as it does stick to the main plot points very well. It does play it quite safe in that regard, which is why it ends up being quite a long film.
Yeah. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, he hit pretty much everything. The thing is, he's right. They leave the major points of the movie intact. They just skip some other stuff in between.
Yeah.
And, we all complain when we see a movie based on a book, and the movie isn't the same. They change the story.
Sure.
And that's not really fair of us, because in reality, the way you tell a story in a novel should be very different than the way you tell a story in a movie. And sometimes what makes a good novel doesn't make a good movie, and they need to change things to make the movie a good movie. So in a way, I think this could have actually been a better movie if maybe it had deviated from the story a little bit more.
Yeah, where I think that it is, I think that it is weaker in the Quidditch sections, because I don't know, and I can't even explain what they could do that's better, but I just found it more entertaining in the book, and I think it is actually stronger in the Mirror of Erised.
Erised, yeah.
Erised, I think that is really moving in the movie, and it's good in the book, but I don't know, for some reason it just hit me seeing the visual of his parents, like, was more sort of moving to me in that with the music and kind of everything. So I would say, yeah.
It is a scene that requires a lot of expression, and the actors involved, like Harry and his parents, they do hit that very well in that scene, and as you say, the music as well. It is a very well acted scene. It is one of Daniel Radcliffe's better moments in the film.
I felt like the actors that were his parents looked too old in the mirror, though. Like, they should look in their early 20s, maybe, because they were young parents when they died. I thought they looked old enough to have an 11-year-old, but I thought that was odd. Like, why are they so old?
Well, it could be maybe they aged within the mirror or something. That's how old they would be if they were alive back then.
Yeah.
And we don't know how old James and Lily were in the films, like the films and the and the books could deviate in terms of the dates and the ages of the characters. But we know that they were in their early 20s when they died in the book, but that might not necessarily be true in the film.
True.
All right. So okay. Okay. I just have real quick with this one because I want to get into the meat of the book. But I mean, the meat in the movie. But just what do you think is the strongest casting and the weakest casting in this movie? Not counting how they might grow into it. For me, I think the strongest casting. I still think that it is Alan Rickman as Snape. He's just so good at being this snarly, just arrogant, awful, and he does grow, and you do see all these other sides to him, but I don't know. I just think he's perfect in the part, and so he's, I think, the strongest, and for me, the weakest. I have to say, I thought that I didn't think that Emma Watson actually was that good. I know that might be a controversial opinion, but I felt like she was I don't know, reading her lines a little bit, like she was just, I don't know, it just seemed a little rote.
She was a little over the top almost with some.
Yeah. I mean, and she definitely becomes amazing, and she's a great actress and everything. And for her being her first movie she'd ever done, like, give her some break. I mean, come on. Like, she did pretty darn good. I mean, at least Daniel Radcliffe had done, some things before. But I don't know. I felt like and I have to say, I don't think Draco's that strong either. But anyway, so that would be my pick. I would say I think Alan Rickman and Emma Watson would probably be for that. What about you, Jeremy? You want to start this one?
I have to say I really like Richard Harris as Dumbledore. I felt like we lost quite a bit when he passed away and was replaced with Michael Gambon. I just feel like he's exactly what I pictured as I was reading the books and thinking about Dumbledore, and really matches the description in the books better. And so I really like him in the role. I agree with Snape. I can't remember the name of the guy who plays Hagrid at the moment, but I really felt like he was a good.
Robbie Coltrane.
There you go. Yeah, Robbie, and I think he was very good, very well cast. There's never a second where I don't see him as Hagrid, as opposed to an actor playing Hagrid. I feel like the kids were probably the weakest link in the movie, but
they're also kids.
They're also kids. So you have that.
Yeah. What about you, Abby?
I agree with you that Alan Rickman was really a solid choice for Snape, and I love Maggie Smith, she's fantastic, but somebody else could have been Professor McGonagall. She plays it well, but it's not that big a role, and it's not that difficult a role, I don't think.
Right.
I think Alan Rickman really has the toughest job in the whole movie, and he does it really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think I would agree that in general, the kids are the weakest link. They're not great actors. As I was watching it this time, though, I was thinking, man, what a burden this director had of choosing the cast for these movies. I mean, he may not have realized, and the casting director may not have realized, what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because they were choosing people that they were stuck with and that other directors would be stuck with for 5 more movies after that. And we didn't know how the kids were going to mature. We didn't know what they'd be like when they were older. We didn't know when their voices would change or how well they would act through adolescence, or if they'd even want to still do it by the time they were 15 or 16 or 18 years old.
They could have died. Who knows? Who knows?
You don't know. Like, that's a really hard job to do. And ultimately, I think they chose they chose well, and the other directors throughout the series worked well with the kids as they grew, and they did good things with them to make it natural, to make it this is Harry and Ron and Hermione, and this is how it was always supposed to be.
What about you, Richard?
Hey, well, Betty, basically I do everything. Sorry. What were we saying something? It's going to be off.
I don't know why we're hearing the echo.
And no, my thing seems to have gone off sync a bit. I know it's gone. It seems to be okay.
Okay, now it's better.
Yeah. Well, basically, I definitely agree with what we've been saying about Alan Rickman as Snape. That is just absolutely perfect. I mean, the way he speaks, his voice is just exactly how you imagine hearing Snape when you imagine him speaking in the books. And I do also very much like Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall. She just captures that perfectly and continues to do so in the future films. And Richard Harris as Dumbledore, I have kind of mixed feelings about him. He captures like the old wisdom very well, but also Dumbledore's supposed to have kind of a bit more energy to him as well, and Harris doesn't do that quite as well as Gambon. He just seems this very frail old man. But mostly the adult actors are cast very well, and they're definitely all trying their best. And the child actors are just starting out, and some of them do very well. I actually did like Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy very much. He has this great kind of contemptuous attitude, this smugness, and as I said before, Daniel Radcliffe as Harry in this one, he's a bit flat to me. He's not that expressive, but eventually with Prisoner of Azkaban, I think he does start getting a lot better.
Yeah, I think he's said that Cuarón really helped him a lot. Yeah. Alfonso Cuarón in that one. Okay, so let's get started talking about the meat of the story. So my first question is: does Dumbledore take a risk in leaving Harry with the Dursleys? They threaten him at one point with a week without food. He could die or be permanently scarred from the abuse, mentally scarred. So, starting with you, Richard, what do you think about that?
Well, basically, it's explained in the later books that Dumbledore's priority was keeping Harry safe from Voldemort's followers, and so he would be safe and in the Dursleys' home because that's where his mother's blood is, where his mother's sister lives. But and he is aware that it was a risk, but Dumbledore does take risks. It is unfortunate that Harry grows up in this unfortunate environment, but at the same time, he does still become a good person, who knows right from wrong. Whereas in like some other environments, he might have grown up a bit like Dudley.
Yeah, been too pampered.
Yeah. Especially considering he is a celebrity in the wizarding world, and he grows up not knowing about anything like that. If he'd known about that from the get-go, he probably would have gone a bit arrogant about it.
What do you think, Jeremy?
No, I agree with that assessment. I don't have anything to add to it.
All right. Okay. So the next question I had is, what do you think of the letters and the introduction to Diagon Alley, to Hogwarts, just the whole sort of introduction to the wizarding world? How does it work for you in the film? What about you, Abby? You want to start?
I like it. I think that's the piece that was kind of missing for me in the book. I felt like the introduction to the wizarding world was too long and rambling, and I didn't buy into it right away. It seemed odd to me, and we didn't even meet Harry Potter really in that first chapter. And in the movie, I think it works really well to have the letters and having him talk to Professor McGonagall in her cat form is cute. And, Dumbledore seems very magical, so having him be a part of all that was really important. I don't remember. Did we see Hagrid in the opening scene?
We do, yeah. He comes in on the motorbike.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I can't remember if I have that in my head because I've read the book, or if they did it in the movie, and that's cool. Like, all of it is very engaging, I guess I would say, and The letters. What were the letters? They had the letter to the Dursleys.
Yeah, just all the it starts with one, and then it gets to be three, and then it's like through the fireplace, and they end up leaving. There's that whole sort of segment with them battling the letters, I guess, and then Hagrid finally comes.
With the letter to the invitation to come to school, his acceptance to Hogwarts.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that played out really well. I thought it was funny. The Dursleys were maybe a little over the top silly, but I think it worked because I think they were over the top silly in the book too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked it.
What about you, Richard? What do you think about that sort of the introduction?
Yeah, I do like the introduction very much. I think the opening scene with Dumbledore and McGonagall and Hagrid, that's pretty much the best place to open it rather than starting off with all the stuff in the Dursleys that we get in the book. It's pretty much just the right length there, and then we get this little idea of this mundane and horrible life that Harry has with the Dursleys, and then it is good how we get these letters suddenly coming in and really stirring the Dursleys up and disconcerting them and introducing a bit of chaos into this Muggle world. And I really liked how in the book it's Hagrid who comes to get Harry and bring him to the magical world because Hagrid really is everything that the Dursleys hate. He's obviously a very abnormal person, this giant hairy man. And I did really like how the movie gave us the introduction to Diagon Alley as well with these very whimsical set designs where things look a bit wonky and colourful and the music as well in the Diagon Alley scene is very good, I think.
Yeah.
It's very lilting.
What do you
quite cheerful music?
Yeah. What do you think, Jeremy, about that introduction to the first part of the film?
I think it was really well done. I think in this case, Daniel Radcliffe did a really good job of being, the scene where he finds out he's a wizard. Like it's, the whole introduction I really appreciated because he's as taken aback by it as we are, and that's really what gives us the buy-in. Because if we're just presented with this world and you're like, well, you're a wizard, and he's like, oh yeah, totally, but he doesn't believe it at first, and that's the same with us. Like any of us would not believe it, and so we see ourselves as Harry Potter. We're with him, like we're like, we don't believe this yet. So tell us what makes me a wizard. Why does this work? And so I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was well done. The pacing in the beginning was really good. I felt like it hit the major points that it needed to without dragging. And again, the set design, it was all really, really great. And you have an introduction also at Gringotts. You have Warwick Davis as the Goblin.
Yeah.
He also plays Professor Flitwick, which is really interesting. But that was really, really neat.
Yeah, I really think that is all super strong with the letters and the Diagon Alley and him getting the wand that Voldemort has, and there's just so many little sort of hints of things to come in that beginning setup that I think pays off really nice. You see him talking to the snake. I think that really works. I don't know. I just think it's really sort of gets you immersed into kind of what we're going to see, not only in this film, but in all the, in the coming up lore, I guess. I really do like it. Okay, so all right. So the next question is, how do you think Voldemort and the idea of being afraid of a name is handled in the movie? We see that from the very beginning when Hagrid is telling Harry in Diagon Alley about what happened to his parents, and he can barely say the name of Voldemort, and it's kind of going to be a running theme throughout the course of the series. This idea of sort of giving not giving Voldemort a name or not using his name kind of gives it power. So I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy, about how Voldemort is handled in this film?
I don't have any problems with it. It seemed similar enough to what they do in the books. That the people are afraid to say it. It does give him power. I think in the later books you have Dumbledore referring to him as his given name of Tom Riddle instead of Voldemort, and I think again it just says, look, you made this name that is supposed to strike fear into people, but when it comes down to it, you're still just Tom Riddle, and I think you do lend more fear to and more power if you treat it as a taboo thing or something you shouldn't say, and fear of the name is just generating more fear of the person himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think Voldemort is handled pretty well in this film. That he's introduced with his little explanation through Hagrid, and then he's kind of left out of things until towards the end where we kind of realise his involvement. With regards to not saying his name, that's not quite so good in the film because there doesn't seem to be such a strong reaction to saying his name. Like in the book when Harry says Voldemort, like Ron or somebody will be like, no, say you know who, and people will flinch when they hear Voldemort's name. But there's not so much of that in the film, except when Hagrid is uncertain about it at the beginning. But it is a good device for showing us just how intimidating this guy is, because like if people don't want to say his name, then just how frightening is he? And I noticed as well that when in the one shot when Mr. Ollivander says to Harry, that one's brother gave you that scar, you don't actually hear a little bit of Voldemort's theme in the
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Cool. Okay. All right. My next question is, what do you think of the character development of the four leads in the film, meaning Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Draco? That's what I think of as the four leads. Is Hermione too much of a know-it-all, too unlikable? Is Draco too much of a villain? Starting with you, Abby, what do you think about that?
I think all of them are, obviously the acting is all a little bit campy because they're 11. But I actually like the way Hermione comes off. I agree with Richard that maybe she was almost a little too much buddies with them. There was definitely a feeling of, in the book, Ron and Harry being pals, for sure, right off the bat. And Harry and Hermione kind of being this annoying girl that bothers them. And then eventually after the troll thing, they become friends. And that's really what the troll thing is there for, is to give us a reason for them to be friends. So in the movie, it kind of was not needed, I don't think. I guess it shows some of their... It does kind of show how they work together, I guess, to defeat him. But they work together to do other things in the movie too. So, but yeah, I thought Hermione was a little bit obnoxious, but I thought it was funny obnoxious, and she was supposed to be obnoxious. They were supposed to be really annoyed by her. The only thing that didn't make sense to me was that they weren't annoyed enough by her.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Draco. He was over the top in his villain role, but I thought it kind of worked because Draco is kind of over the top. He's an over the top jerkface, right from the word go, and it works. I think it worked out. I think it worked out pretty well. I think between the four leads, as much as their acting is still developing, I think that was the four of them pulled off their roles really nicely, and I think that the spirit of each character came through really strongly, as Rowling intended.
I think they have good chemistry together. Even from I don't know, you say frenemies, but even Draco and Harry, I think in a weird way have chemistry in their relationship, the way that they bounce off each other. So it works for me. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Richard?
Well, I think you're right. They do have some kind of chemistry in the fact that Draco clearly has this agenda of how some wizarding families are better than others, and Harry has grown, and because Harry has grown up of understanding right over wrong, and being bullied by Dudley, he doesn't like bullies, and so he naturally feels opposed to Malfoy. and while he was never able to do anything about Dudley bullying him, which you don't really see in the film, but but now he's in this environment where he can do magic and he has people to back him up, he feels more confident in taking on Malfoy, and so they do have this back and forth. And in the first film, there's not really much development on Draco's part. But, he is really just this antagonistic figure. It's not until later that we start to get more into his head.
Right.
But, and as for Harry, Ron, and Hermione, I think they're handled pretty well in terms of development, with the exception of like as I said before, Hermione's relationship with Harry and Ron being a bit inconsistent until after the incident with the troll. And I did notice in the scene with the Devil's Snare after they first go through the trapdoor, it's Ron who starts panicking and so doesn't sink through the Devil's Snare, and it starts to ensnare him. And that doesn't happen in the book. It's Hermione who loses her head a bit and can't remember how to make a magical fire.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and the films do seem to have a little bit of a tendency to make Ron a bit more thick than he is in the books. Sometimes they don't treat Ron very well, but that's not so bad in this film. It's worse in the next one. But
Right.
The characters are generally handled pretty well in this one.
What do you think about the four lead character development, Jeremy?
Well, I agree with most of what's been said. I feel like just from everything we know about those four characters, and especially the three, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, they're all in Gryffindor, but Ron could have easily been cast in Hufflepuff. Hermione could have easily been Ravenclaw for her intelligence. And of course we know Harry could have ended up in Slytherin, and so they've all ended up in Gryffindor, really because of their loyalty and their bravery, which kind of it runs a little bit counter to what seems to be their dominant nature, and you get to see glimpses of that in this film, where Ron sacrifices himself on the chessboard, thinking he's probably going to die because of it, but he knows it's the right thing to do, and even though he looks terrified, he still is making the choice that's for the good of everyone, and so I really appreciate seeing that. I do miss when I think you see a little bit of that with Hermione too after the troll, where she does break from her know-it-all perfectionist character by taking the heat for the whole event, when it was really the boys who'd upset her that sent her off into the bathroom by herself, instead of saying, well, she just took the heat for the whole troll thing, saying she could make up this story, and that was kind of her, saying, okay, we're going to be a group, and that was really neat. The one thing that I really miss, and I don't want to make the movie longer, but when they're at the end after the chessboard and they're trying to move on to find the stone, I really miss having the potions station that Snape set up, and seeing Hermione work through the logic of which potions would be poison, which one would allow them to go on, and which one allowed them to go back. I really like that. Really that demonstration of her intelligence, because most of the movie she's remembering facts, but this is one event where she truly has to figure something out and demonstrate her intelligence.
I don't think
That's
that
a
would have
good point.
worked.
I forgot about that.
So I don't think that would have worked very well on screen, though.
Yeah, it doesn't work. That the building up the chess match is a much better suspense building event rather than going to this quiet room and
drinking a bottle. Yeah.
You brought up a lot of really good stuff. I do have two comments from our friend Joe Tefano, who couldn't be here. He had to work. But he says, I've heard a couple of people accuse Emma Watson overacting as Hermione throughout the series. I personally don't think that she does. But what say you guys? He said, his favorite line is when Ron says she needs to sort out her priorities. And let's see. And then he says, the best sequence in the movie for me is the chessboard scene. When the chess pieces start ripping each other apart, I start to tense up overall, I really enjoy this movie. It's a bit too family-friendly in certain parts, but it's a charming movie, and I like to watch it from time to time. I think it brings up a good point that the Ron is pretty good, I think, comic relief in this film. He has a lot of sort of, she's out of her mind, you know. She really needs to sort out her priorities, kind of. He does have some pretty funny, I think, lines, so that's good. And I like you brought up the, we're kind of jumping all over the place, I'm sorry, but it was just kind of the way that it worked. I like that you brought up the sorting hat. We forgot to talk about that early on. And it's an interesting device because when you really think about it, it is sort of weird way to sort 11-year-olds based on these attributes that, I don't know, are you really that brave at 11, you know, kind of thing. But and also it does feel a little bit like, boy, those poor Slytherins, like that they don't get the house cup, they don't get all this stuff, and they there's lots of really, you know, good Slytherins, but I guess I'll say real quick, like, which house have you guys been sorted online? And me, I'm in Hufflepuff. And so if you have anything to say about the sorting hat, I guess. What about you, Richard? Do you want to start?
Okay. Well, I will say that on Pottermore I was sorted into Ravenclaw, which I definitely agree with, because that is one of the things I value about myself. I think I have a pretty good brain, without sounding too vain. But it's hard to say about the sorting. I mean, Dumbledore does say it in Deathly Hallows. Sometimes I think we sort too soon, and people do change over time, and it's a flawed system, but it does get together as children who will share some qualities with each other. And I do agree with you about Slytherin. They do certainly have a bit of an image problem, and it's one of the things I wish Rowling had handled better a bit, because you just say in interviews that Slytherins aren't all bad, but then in the books they do look all bad. Although, to be honest, it is from Harry's perspective, and you can understand why the Slytherins don't really like Harry, and Harry doesn't spend much time in the Slytherin common room, so he's not seeing all the any of the nice Slytherins that might be around. And if there's any Slytherin that just walks past him in the corridor and doesn't do anything, he's probably not going to notice that compared to a Slytherin who just jeers at him and gives him an insult.
Yeah.
The one thing I noticed that's weird about the Sorting Hat is their reactions. Most of them are okay, but there's one that's a little weird to me. So it makes sense, of course, Malfoy's going to be super happy he's in Slytherin. Makes sense for Ron to be relieved he's in Gryffindor, because that's where his family has all gone, and he didn't want to be the oddball. It makes sense for Harry to be happy, because he doesn't know that much about any of the houses, and he's just glad he's not in Slytherin. But then you have Hermione, who's a total brainiac. Like, she's a total brainiac, grade-grubbing, smarty pants. She is a smarty pants. It doesn't make sense to me that she wouldn't have been hoping for Ravenclaw. Like, it seems like she would have wanted that. But she didn't. She was just happy. Oh, yeah. It just wasn't kind of a non-reaction. Just like, oh, yay, hooray.
Yeah. Well, Pottermore, it does say that the hat was on Hermione's head for like 4 minutes when I was trying to decide between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw.
That's true.
And again, I keep going back to the book, but in the book, Hermione says, "I hope I'm in Gryffindor," because it sounds like the best one. I heard Dumbledore was a Gryffindor. You know, Hermione's Muggle-born. Hermione's is a Muggle-born, and she's just finding out about this world, and so maybe Gryffindor would be the one she was most attracted to, and so maybe it was Hermione's own personal preference that finally turned it in favor of Gryffindor for the Sorting Hat.
With that detail from the book, which I totally had forgotten, that makes a lot more sense. In the movie, you don't really get that. It's just, yay, I'm in Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
Remember, did you notice in the movie how like the students all get sorted in this completely random order, and we only see like 5 students getting sorted, including the director's daughter, because
really?
that's actually the Chris Columbus's daughter playing Susan Bones, the redhead.
Interesting.
Funny.
I didn't know that.
I did notice that too, though. In the book, we get the whole alphabetical order thing, and we get several other students.
Yeah, and it's not even in order of birthdays or anything because like Harry comes along and his birthday is like on the 31st of July.
Yeah. Abby and Jeremy, have you guys been sorted online? Have you done any of the quizzes?
Probably years ago. I can't remember. No.
Yeah, I know I did them, but I don't remember. I think I was generally in either Gryffindor or Ravenclaw.
It's kind of hilarious. Like as somebody who likes it but isn't insane about Harry Potter, I was doing some research online yesterday, and people are like so hardcore about like their house and who that they are. Like, there are videos on there on YouTube, and they're not tongue in cheek at all about like discrimination against Slytherin and how like it's like wrong, and there needs to be like well, calm down.
It's become a part of their identity.
Yeah, oh, totally. That like I'm a Slytherin and I'm proud of it, and I'm tired of people hating on it and all this stuff. Like, no, you're not. You're not. It's a book. I don't know. It's so funny. That to me is hilarious.
It's pretend. Slytherin isn't a real thing.
Oh my gosh.
People take this very seriously.
Yeah. Oh, they do. So I couldn't believe it. Like, a part of me thought that they were joking, but like I know there are people that literally like believe in the Jedi thing as like practically a religion for them, but like at least that I don't know. Like, this was it's just amazing how far fandoms can go. But
there are people who actually play Quidditch.
Yeah.
It's like some Muggle version of Quidditch. You don't need magic to play. I'm not sure what all the rules are, but I think they probably do away with the whole 150 points for the snitch thing. But I'll need to check exactly what the rules are. But there is like an actual Quidditch league, I think.
Oh, really? They're in England?
I think so. There might be one in America as well, because there are pretty hardcore fans in England and America.
My roommate, when I told her, she said, "Those are people that need to make friends outside of Comic-Con." Like, it's very true.
Yeah, Quidditch. I had heard that I knew that there was a real version, like a Muggle version of Quidditch, which is funny because in my mind, Quidditch is basically imitating like soccer. So Muggle Quidditch is called soccer, but
or lacrosse. I think it was more like lacrosse.
At BYU is like nerdo town. They have all kinds of weird people who are into major fantasy stuff. And I think there were people who got together and played Quidditch there.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay, we did have a couple comments from a follower of my channel. Her name is Potterhead, and she did say, I agree with you, this film is quite long for family film, but then at the same time, I don't like it when they cut out anything from the book because those books are so perfect. And she says, strongest cast members, Alan Rickman, Maggie Smith, Robbie Coltrane, John Cleese, I forgot to mention him, he's good, and Tom Felton were very strong. So there you go. Okay.
Well, John Cleese is barely in it. I think he's only in the first two films.
Oh, it's really?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny though. Like, he adds sort of character, just with his whole nearly headless, and how can he be nearly headless?
I mean, there are a few adult actors that are a bit wasted in this film, like Julie Walters as Molly Weasley. She only gets this very brief scene in this one, but she's going to be in later on.
Yeah.
And she does a good job then. So it did seem like they were kind of planning for a future with some of these actors, knowing that they'll be using them more later on.
Well, I mean, and even Richard Griffiths and Fiona Shaw as the Dursleys, like, they're great actors.
They are, yeah.
And, but anyway, okay, so let's talk a little bit about Quidditch. So what do you think of the sport and the big game where Harry's broom is cursed? How do you think that they pull off that kind of thing? The introduction to it, all of that. What about you, starting Jeremy?
Well, I actually really enjoy the sport. I think that they do a pretty good job. Again, some of the CG gets away from them and it just hasn't held up over time. But I don't remember having a problem with it back in 2003 when I first saw it. But I really enjoy the Quidditch sequences. I feel like it's one of the more magical parts of this world. You can actually have a sport up on broomsticks, and it's really fun to watch. The sport itself, I know there's a lot of just hearing the last couple of days talk about the snitch being worth 150 points. Well, what's the point of even scoring goals? But you do remember there in Goblet of Fire, they have the World Cup, and Victor Crumb catches the snitch, but the other team still won because they had so many points. And so there is it's not a guaranteed victory, but often you'll win if you just get the snitch. Especially
kids Quidditch, it would be a very
kids Quidditch. Yeah, you're usually going to get that way. But I really like it. I think it's one of the pieces that, as a sports fan, for me, it was really neat to see what does wizard sport look like.
Yeah, I do like the Quidditch scene quite a lot in the in this first film, with the exception being like some of the CGI people who don't look very convincing, and they can kind of see how it would get samey after a while, so they kind of cut it out of the later films. I don't think there's any Quidditch in Order of the Phoenix, and then you see it really quite briefly in Half-Blood Prince. And as for the the 150 points thing, I suppose that is mainly possibly to kind of make sure that Harry's the one who's most responsible for the wins, because he's the seeker and he's the hero of the books. And also we know from like in the wider world there is a league system of Quidditch, and also it seems to work that way in Hogwarts, because in later books they're talking about how they need to get a certain amount of points in order to win the Quidditch Cup. So the goals do count for something, and it is kind of a little bit alarming just how dangerous this sport is. Watching it kind of older, like when you're quite young, you just think, oh, this is really fun, rolling around on broomsticks and swatting at these balls, and then you realise just how much of a risk there is for serious injury. I mean, I remember the riff tracks in one of the Harry Potter films said to me, like, so you need a permission slip to go down to Hogsmeade, but when it comes to Quidditch, unless your parents know, the better.
Yeah, that's true. We're gonna let you fly around 150 feet above the ground, but can't go to Hogsmeade.
I did think about that this watch through and read through that, like, what are Hermione's parents? Because they're both Muggles, right? And they must be horrified, or she must not tell them anything of what's going on, because I mean, like, my daughter was dealing with dragons and three-headed dogs, and like.
She would never be going back to that school.
Yeah, that would be enough.
Hogwarts stays at Hogwarts.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's a good point about the danger of it. I think it really fits in the sort of world of school movies and stories. Like you have to have sort of a sport kind of thing. It just sort of works. I think the only thing maybe, I don't know. I just think you always have some kind of matchup of some kind, and you have to sort of pit Draco versus Harry in some kind of way. Yeah. And what better way to do it? I guess they have the duel as well, but I just think you're right on about saying how it just sort of gives him the chance to be sort of the hero and everything like that, and it sort of sets this mystery of who was it that saved Harry, in the fire and all of that. What was Quirrell trying to do? Snape trying to do, all of that. So I think it is effective, especially when we think of it in terms of the whole series.
Yeah, it's really the only bit of foreshadowing of Quirrell you get in the film. I mean, in the book you do get a few moments of him acting a bit suspiciously, and you only realise later on that was pointing you towards the fact that he's the villain. But in the film, it's only when you see him being knocked over, when Snape is set on fire, that that's the only real clue that maybe he was the one cursing the broom. And if you kind of look at him, you kind of look at him while him staring at the broom while the focus is on Snape.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. My next question is actually about Quirrell. Now, one of the things I think, if you could say that there is a lazy thing about J.K. Rowling's writing, which I wouldn't say, but she does fall back on the Defense Against the Dark art teacher being the bad guy a lot. And of course you don't know that when you're reading the first book, and so, or watching the first movie, and by the third or fourth, it's just like, okay, we got it. We know. But what do you think about Quirrell? And is he too underdeveloped? Is he right enough for you? What do you think, Abby?
In the movie, he's a little bit underdeveloped. But I think overall, as a bad guy, he kind of works okay to have an underdeveloped villain, because we have a lot going on in this first movie. We're being introduced to this entirely new world.
Right.
We have Harry's rivalry with Draco Malfoy. We have Snape being set up as kind of his personal villain. So it kind of made sense that there just wasn't a lot of room for Quirrell to do that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I do.
Having kind of a quivering idiot he was just kind of stuttery and obnoxious, and that kind of worked. I think that worked and it threw the kids off the scent, so he wasn't invading the rest of the story.
It does make you feel like after a while that Dumbledore needs to have a stronger interview process.
Right.
Always Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers, they get replaced so much that nobody wants to do it.
Yes.
It's really a lack of choice for Dumbledore. If you could maybe work out some kind of agreement where like each Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher only stays for 1 year, and that's worked out in advance rather than some horrible accident befalling them, then things will work out a bit better.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't want the job.
Maybe he could like alternate between two of them between each year, and then maybe it wouldn't they wouldn't be cursed.
Can you guys remind me, why doesn't Dumbledore give it to Snape, who clearly wants it?
Well, I think it's two separate reasons. First, the position. It's kind of hinted the position really is cursed. There's kind of this indication that Voldemort did somehow make this curse so they can only keep a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for 1 year, and Dumbledore wants to keep Snape around until they're in a position where he knows Snape will have to eventually leave anyway.
Right.
And also Snape claims that that Dumbledore was afraid that because Snape comes from this quite dark background, that if he started teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts, it might lead him back to his old ways.
Right. We kind of know he was involved with. He was kind of a double agent anyway.
He was, yeah.
So, and I think Dumbledore knew that. So that reasoning didn't seem as strong to me. Like he's not going to worry about him. He's going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Well, and you get when you read or watch Half-Blood Prince, you get that Snape was really very gifted with potions as well,
Yeah,
so he's also very suited to his post.
Maybe Dumbledore felt like it would sort of it'd be harder for Snape to be the double agent that he is if he had that post. I don't know. Maybe it's easier to kind of fly under the radar a little bit more.
It's possible.
He also was really useful as the potions guy who has access to all of the potions.
True.
Dumbledore needed him a lot.
True.
Hmm.
Good points. Okay. So let's see. We already talked a lot about. Okay, so in the climax, they face obstacles that rely on skills of each of the three kids. Hermione helps with the Devil's Snares, Ron the chess match, Harry with Quirrell and the Stone. What do you think about each of these events?
And the broomsticks going after the key.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, you want to start, Jeremy? What do you think of that whole obstacle course sort of section?
Again, I really liked that each of the characters was given a chance to shine, and again, I feel like the potions from the book was a little better example for Hermione. But overall, I really liked the sequence. I liked that it really took all three. There's no one of them could have made it all the way through alone. and so, but it took all of them together, and I really like that. Really, just solidifying that team. So there's no question how much they're willing to do for each other, and that they're all really willing to risk everything for the greater good.
Yeah. You really get a sense that it bonds them as these friends, this tight alliance that, from what they've been through in this first set of challenges.
Yeah, and I also, like, you see, in the book you hear, Dumbledore, and a little bit in the movie, you hear that Dumbledore was kind of coordinating, what these defenses were going to be, and they were designed for these kids to make it through. I don't know how much he sees into the future, but he knew that basically that these kids would go after it, and he knew Harry would end up in front of that mirror, and so the defenses were designed to play to their strengths, but it wasn't easy for them, but he knew that they would be able to do it.
Let's see. What about you, Richard? What do you think?
Well, I do agree. Really, it would have been the potions would have been a better example of Hermione's logical ability than just her remembering the devil's snare hates sunlight, and also to try and relax and just fall through when you fall into it. And that would have been more worth the points that she gets for it. But otherwise, I do like the obstacle course and how you say it builds them together as a unit. I do find it a bit difficult to get my head around what was going through Dumbledore's head with it, because it does appear to be that he set it up so Harry and his friends would get through and defend the stone. And really, the only thing you can say about that is that how the Dumbledore knows that Harry is going to have to face Voldemort eventually, and that he needs to be taught in this way. He has to be prepared, and so he has to think about these things.
That's true. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it from that way. That he had designed it particularly for these three characters to excel in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Abby, about this section?
My thought actually on this was, this clearly was not designed to keep an adult wizard out of the chamber, or wherever they are, because three kids were able to get through it, and it wasn't easy for them, but they're 11. They're not even, they're first years. They're little kids.
Yeah.
Little kids are able to get through it. So that was my thought too. I was like, this is a really terribly defended stone, apparently. But I think you're correct. I think you guys are right. I think he knew. I think he knew that Harry was the only person who could get the stone for Voldemort, and I think he also knew that Harry and his friends needed to go through this experience to be able to move forward, and he knew Harry needed this kind of trial of fire. What doesn't make sense to me is, or what I guess I just can't remember. Why does Dumbledore take the stone out of the vault in the first place? Were they worried about it getting broken into or something?
Well, it does get broken into on Harry's birthday later on, after it's already been emptied.
Okay, so he knew that was coming.
Yeah, so he thought Hogwarts would be the safest place for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's fun, kind of silly. I mean, he does say at the end that his most brilliant thing was making it something that only a person who wasn't going to use it could find the stone. So maybe he was just trying to kind of buy time or something with all of the booby traps, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I don't know.
To me, about this scene is, so if you have this setup, you know that Voldemort or whoever's working for him is going to end up down here in this room. And so why not just make some sort of trap, Why send the kids in after them when you already know they're going to make it through and they're going to be there? That's the one thing that kind of bugs me about it is, you force this confrontation that maybe it didn't have to happen. I mean, could Dumbledore have taken out Quirrell? I think so. Harry's getting out of that was more luck than anything in this round as far as surviving the encounter. So I think Dumbledore took a bit of a risk, and again, why not just create a trap for Quirrell, because you knew he was going to go through all this to get there, whoever the villain was.
Maybe it was he wanted Harry to burn him with his hands or whatever. I don't know, whole thing.
I don't think Dumbledore knew that would happen. I think he was able to explain it once it did, but I don't think he knew that would be how it happened. It
is a difficult one, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I guess just my last question is just sort of what would be a favorite sequence of the film for you? Sort of final thoughts. Mine is still when Harry's looking in the mirror of Elsrod, I think it's called. I really like that in the book, and I really like it in the movie. And the way that I think that Daniel Radcliffe is actually really good in that scene, and you just see the longing for what he can never have. And I like that the way that what J.K. Rowling is sort of saying, where it's people have wasted away in front of it, longing for what you can't have, for your greatest desires. And I think that's something sort of interesting about that, that like I don't know, that something about that, about how action, not just hopefulness, is required. Like, they both need to be there in order, or otherwise it's just sort of, it's sort of a waste in a way, and I thought that was really interesting, and that you really have to, that it actually, it's not just what you're thinking and wanting, but you actually have to go and make it happen. So I like that whole segment a lot, and it just sort of gets to the heart of why I think these stories work so well, is because in the end they are about family and honor and about friendship and just all of these good qualities that make you engaged throughout the whole story. All the land and the Quidditch and everything is fun, but at the end it's about these characters and their desire to be good people and to rid the world of this evil force of Voldemort. So, what about you, Abby? You want to go first to sort of your final thoughts and maybe what stood out to you the most?
My favorite scene in this movie is kind of mundane, actually. It's the train. It's when Harry and Ron meet, and we get to see what kind of, up to that point, we knew Harry was bullied by the Dursleys. We knew no child deserves to be treated the way that they treat him, but we didn't really know what kind of person he was. And a lot of times, kids who, he would be justified in being spiteful and angry and not a very nice person after growing up in that environment. And we get on the train, and he sees Ron's sandwich, and he has a pocket full of money. And he buys the whole cart full of candy for the two of them. And it's kind of your first glimpse of, he's a good guy. This is someone who could be really awful and could take all this awfulness and be bitter, but he's chosen to be a good friend, and I think he sees, rather than saying, ha, it's my turn to have all the good stuff, he sees Ron's circumstance and is like, I've always been the kid who didn't get anything. And he has compassion and empathy, and he shares. And then Hermione comes along and is smarty-pantsy and cute. I just love that scene. I just think it's I think she really nailed bringing those three together in that first moment.
It's a good one. I like it too. What about you, Jeremy?
So overall, I think my the thing that leaves a lasting impression with me is the set design. Honestly, I think it was really well done. Hogwarts as a whole was really well done. The Dursleys, Diagon Alley, it just really created a world that you it was interesting, it was exciting, and fairly true to what you're described what's described in the books, but it really felt like there weren't parts of the world that really stood out as like, oh, why is that there? Why does that look like that? It's just, this is the world, and it was really well done. Um, for me, my favorite scene was in Ollivanders when Harry is choosing the wands. I liked the reactions when the wands weren't right, and I really liked the way that Ollivander explained about the wands. I actually feel I'm a little creeped out by him, because he's a little bit of not necessarily evil, but I think he appreciates evil when evil is good. He says, oh, well, he did great things, great and terrible things, but they were great anyway. And so I think the scene's a little bit creepy, but it really stuck with me, and I felt like it was really powerful.
That's a good one. Another great one. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, well, besides the Mirror of Erised scene that we've already mentioned, that's a very powerful scene. The one that stands out to me is the ending scene, really, where basically we kind of get this conclusion to this whole. The film is basically about setting up the world that we're going to be spending another 6-7 movies in, and now we kind of see the person Harry has become, and he's comfortable in this world, and when Hermione says this to him, it feels strange to be going home, doesn't he? He just looks towards Hogwarts and says, "I'm not going home, not really." And I actually like that Hagrid gives him the photo album of his parents on the platform as well, because we're going back to that theme of family that Rachel mentioned, and that now he's got this kind of tribute to his parents that he's never had before, and it's just this really lovely gift. And I love the music in that scene as well. This kind of ending theme that John Williams does, and I remember thinking after the last book came out and we had the epilogue where Harry and his friends are all grown up and seeing their own children off to Hogwarts. I thought when they get to that in that movie, they've got to have that theme again as the train pulls away, and they do, because that's just perfect.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't notice that about the last one. That was all really good stuff. I think Sorting Hat would probably be my next one I'd throw out there, is I think a really strong scene, fun scene. It's funny because as we're talking about it, I'm like, it was a really good movie, but while I was watching it, I was kind of disappointed because it did feel a little more boring than I remembered. But it's all about, I guess, what you're comparing it to, and it certainly has lots of good qualities to it, and it sets up the world really well. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited to meet every month and talk about these movies and leading up to Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, and so I think it'll be a really enjoyable series to do.
You know about
yeah.
You know about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child as well?
Oh yeah. I think that's sold out in like 2 nanoseconds, but I think it's coming out on. They're making it in printed form.
That's right, yeah. On the here in the UK, it's the 31st of July, which is Harry and J.K. Rowling's birthday.
Okay.
And so I don't know what the situation is in the US.
Yeah, if people that are watching, if you don't know, it's a continuation, right, of Harry after the. Tell us a little more about it, because I've forgotten.
Yeah, I think it's set I think it's supposed to be like after the epilogue, which is 19 years after the end. So the epilogue is 19 years after the book's end, I think I remember it's 1 year after the epilogue, so like 20 years after the book's end, and Harry's got his family now, and I think it's a combination of Harry's story working at the Ministry and his second son Albus at Hogwarts.
Mm. Did the play get good reviews? I know it did well, but did it?
I don't think the play has been on yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I remember,
All right.
I remember there was one of the notable things was that they cast Hermione, a black woman, as Hermione, and some people were a bit unsure about that, and then other people were pointing out that there's no actual mention of Hermione's race in the books.
Good point.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. I think people get their undies in a wad over ridiculous things.
They do, yes.
I mean, these are people who are who want full rights for Slytherin. So what can we expect? So, all right, well, good. I think this has been really good, and we will meet next month and talk about the Chamber of Secrets. This next one, right?
Yeah.
So that will be fun. And thanks so much. And where can, if you want to each, just starting with Abby, if you want to just say where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Abby_kid, and we have a blog right now, jeremyandabbyadopt.wordpress.com.
Great. Jeremy?
You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy_kid.
Great.
You can find me on Twitter under PNE Richard, and my blog is velociraptor256.wordpress.com.
Okay, cool. And
where I will do my reread of the Harry Potter books if you're interested in that.
Cool. I will have those links all in the description section of this video, and you can find me at Smiling LDS Girl on all social media. And thanks so much, you guys. I really, really appreciate it. And we will look forward to next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hmm.